When measuring temperature, there are two main systems with which we typically measure, and those two systems are Fahrenheit and Celsius. Now, Celsius is much more of a common system to use, but Fahrenheit is used in America and then a couple other countries as well. And our objective here is we're trying to convert temperatures between Fahrenheit and Celsius. Now, to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius, you'll need to have two formulas memorized. Now, the first formula is for converting from Fahrenheit to Celsius. And here you see it typed up, and the formula is C for Celsius equals 5 ninths times, and then parentheses, Fahrenheit minus 32. So C equals 5 ninths times F minus 32 in parentheses. So our first example of how to use this formula is actually trying to find the boiling point of water. So in Fahrenheit, the boiling point of water is 212 degrees. And our question is, what does that equal in Celsius? So to convert, we know we're using this formula because we're trying to figure out what is Celsius. And this is a formula where we have solved or arranged for C, for Celsius. All right, so what we do is we can plug in the 212, which is our Fahrenheit temperature, plug that in here for F. So instead of F minus 32 in parentheses, we now have 212 minus 32. And then when you do this, okay, you want to make sure that you follow order of operations, meaning you want to do parentheses first before you multiply by 5 ninths. So 212 minus 32, if you subtract that correctly, you're going to get 180. So what we have is 5 ninths times 180. All right, so two different ways to do this. One is by hand, the other is with a calculator. So by hand, what you can do is write this as being over 1. And then before you multiply, you can simplify first the 9 and the 180, because both of those numbers are divisible by 9. So if you divide 180 by 9, that gives you 20. And then divide 9 by 9, that gives you 1. So then we can multiply 5 times 20 on the top to get 100. 1 times 1 on the bottom is just 1. So 100 over 1 would be 100. So your answer is that C equals 100, meaning that 212 degrees would equal 100 degrees Celsius. Now the other way I mentioned was using a calculator. And if you want to use a calculator to calculate this, what you'd have to do for the fraction is realize that fractions mean division. So you would take 5, divide by 9, and then times that by 180. So if you type that in your calculator, you would get the same answer of 100 back out. And by the way, this is a fact that you should have memorized and that you'll be required to memorize for this lesson. And that's your boiling point of water is 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the same thing as 100 degrees Celsius. So make sure you know this as your boiling point of water. Example 2, here we just have a random number. So this is converting 80 degrees Fahrenheit into Celsius. So again, when you are converting from Fahrenheit to Celsius, we're going to use this formula because this formula has C over here by itself, which is what we're trying to solve for. We're trying to figure out what is the degrees in Celsius. And what you do is you replace this F here and replace that with this 80, because this is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So the Fahrenheit is 80, plug that in for F. So you have 5 ninths times 80 minus 32. 80 minus 32 would be 48. So what we have is 5 ninths times 48. All right, so this one is probably going to be easier to use a calculator because this does not simplify very nicely. But if you do it by hand, you would put this over 1, then you do 5 times 48. That would give you 240, and then 9 times 1 is 9. So doing this by hand, you have to now divide 240 by 9. All right, so 240 divided by 9. If you do that, all right, you're going to get 2 9 goes into 24 two times. 2 times 9 is 18. Subtract. That's 18. Subtract, we get 6. Bring down the 0 and repeat. 9 goes into 60 6 times. 6 times 9 is 54. Subtract, we get 6. And you could just write this with the remainder. The remainder is a fraction, so 6 over the 9. And if we round this, we could round to the nearest whole degree, typically. So this would round up to 27, because 6 ninths is greater than half. So 26 and 6 ninths would round up to be approximately 27 degrees. So we have found that 80 degrees Fahrenheit is equal to approximately 27 degrees Celsius. And then again, if you're using a calculator to do the 5/9 times 48 right here, you would do 5 divided by 9 times 48. And that would give you the 26 and 6 ninths on your calculator. So we've converted from Fahrenheit to Celsius, and now we're going to convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So from Celsius to Fahrenheit, our formula, which is actually can be derived with algebra from that first equation, but our formula is right here of F equals 9/5 times C plus 32. And then notice the parentheses, 9/5 times C is in parentheses. So you want to multiply before you try to add. So our example number 1 for this is we are converting 20 degrees Celsius into Fahrenheit. So if you have this formula, all you have to do is plug in the number 20 in place of C. So we have 9/5 times 20, and then add that with 32. So 9/5 of 20, or 20 over 1. If you're doing this by hand, you could simplify first, where the 20 and 5 both divide by 5 to get 4 and 1. So now we have 9 times 4, which is 36, over 1. So we have 36, and then that's added with 32. And 36 plus 32 gives you 68. So 20 degrees Celsius would equal 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Here's another example, and this one is the normal body temperature. So in Celsius, a normal human body, has a normal temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. And the question is, what is this in Fahrenheit? So again, to do this, we just use our formula, and having this memorized is probably the hardest part. And then once you have the formula, just plug in a 37 right here in place of C. So the 37 you put in place of the C. So we now have 9/5 times 37 plus 32. And then this one will be much easier to do with a calculator. If we did 9 divided by 5 times 37, that gives you 66.6. And then you add that with the 32. So 66 plus 32, that gives you 98. So 98 and then the 0.6 at the end. So in Fahrenheit, the average or normal body temperature would be 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, this is a fact you should have memorized and you'll be expected to know for this lesson. So your normal body temperature for a human being is 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll do one more example like this, and this third example is for the freezing point of water. All right, so our freezing point of water is 0 degrees Celsius. So if you had to convert this into Fahrenheit, what we do is we replace the C in the formula with a 0. So we now have 9/5 times 0 plus 32. And then anything times 0 would just be 0. So this here is equal to 0. And we have 0 plus 32, which would be 32. So 0 degrees Celsius would be 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is a third fact you should have memorized as well, the freezing point of water. So in this lesson, the three things you want to have memorized, the three facts, in addition to the formulas, are going to be the boiling point of water, the freezing point of water, and the normal body temperature. So make sure you know those, and then make sure you have the formulas memorized, and then know how to plug in numbers as needed to convert from one into the other. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.